Hey guys, and welcome to this channel all about how you can make the most out of Amazon PPC to help your Amazon business succeed. And today's video is number 17 of my top Amazon PPC mistakes series. So you're going to learn how to not name your campaign names and what to include instead in your names. I'm going to give you the 10 things you should ideally include in your campaign name to really get the most out of it. And if you've been around, you know I always talk about the importance of campaign structure. But the thing about campaign structure is you can have the best possible campaign structure out there, but if your campaign naming sucks, well, your campaign structure is really just worth half of it, and you're going to be clicking into those campaigns all the time, needing to find out what campaign you're looking at. And also later on, if you're perhaps using automation softwares to harvest search terms from certain campaigns to another campaign, you're going to be having a tough time trying to connect the right campaigns to each other for that automation process. So there are a lot of reasons why you want to really have that good naming system to save yourself a lot of time down the road. Okay, so let's get right into it. The top 10 things you should include for your campaign names. Okay, so first up is your brand, the soul of your company basically. Especially important if you foresee that your Seller Central account will at some point have multiple brands. So you will eventually want to download the performance reports for all the campaigns of a single brand, perhaps compare it to another brand, and you can only do that, or at least it gets a lot easier if you have that brand name in your campaign name. Right, so let's say I had a doghouse, perhaps that would be Paws, for Paws, let's say. Then next up is the actual product name, right? So let's say we had a doghouse, then simply our product name would be Doghouse, right? Now, if you have a lot of doghouses, you might want to be a bit more specific, right? You might want to add, outside or wood, whatever kind of differentiators you have in there, just so you know what that particular campaign actually is all about. Okay, but let's say I only have one doghouse, so that will be enough for me. Now, after we have these basics, we want to remind ourselves what we're actually working with, okay? And so the third point we want to enter here is the ad output type. In this case, it's a sponsored product, right? Could also be sponsored brand, or of course sponsored display nowadays. After that, we want to remind ourselves, number 4, of the ad control type. In this case, we're going to make a manual campaign, so I'm going to add a M. That could of course also be an A for automatic campaign. And you can of course also write these things out, whatever you prefer. And then as the last point in terms of what we're working with, we want to add the match type, right? So let's say we make a campaign with broad keywords, then I am going to add a broad here. So that could also, of course, be an E for exact, P for phrase, or perhaps if you're using an automatic campaign and you're only using the search term targeting, then you could, add close and loose. Or if you're only targeting ASIN listing pages, basically, then you could, add substitutes and complementary. Or if you're using product targeting, you could write ASINs or, category. So things like that, you always want to remind yourself here what you're actually working with, so you have that right at the first glance. So after we know what we're working with, we want to remind ourselves of our targets. And first off, we want to remind ourselves of the actual big purpose of that campaign. And in this case, because I'm using a broad campaign, I want the purpose to be research. So, that could also be testing, could also be cash cows. You could also be wanting to protect your brand or attack competitor brands, or perhaps just target organic keyword rankings. So those are all different kind of purposes that your campaign could have for you. And then next up is the financial target. In other words, the target ACOS, right? So I'm going to remind myself of that one as well. And basically, let's just, as an example, write 35. Then like this, 35. There we go. And if we know our target ACOS, we also know what we can allow ourselves to bid on those targets. So I want to remind myself of the target bid, the max target bid basically. Let's just say as an example, 1.37. Okay, so there we have it. We already know our targets and our goals. And that is also very important to have at a glance. And now we're going towards the finish line. Number 9 is your product category. So it might be perhaps pets, or it might be a little bit more exact. Let's say there's a category called pet homes. I don't know exactly, but here you want to differentiate depending on the different seasonalities of your products. So the purpose here is, if you can group your products in categories that have similar seasonalities, you can then easily bulk edit those campaigns, towards the summer perhaps, and increase or decrease their budgets, because all the products in that specific category will not work or will work specifically well over the coming months. So if you have that in your campaign name, it's also going to make things like that easier down the road, right? And then finally, also kind of optional, I just like to add the start date of this campaign. So basically in this case, July 2020, right? This is kind of practical because you don't always see that start date, the column for the start date everywhere you look at, right? If you click into the campaign, it might not be visible straight away. And if you want to know how far you can go back in the timeline to see the data of that campaign, it's just a practical thing to know how far you can actually go back and still see data, right? So that is indeed it. Those are the 10 points I would always add into every campaign of yours. And basically just copy that and then also add it to your ad group name, because that might be just as important depending on which software you're using. Perhaps it's based on ad groups, and perhaps you're connecting certain ad groups to each other. So just copy that for your ad groups as well. And if you have that kind of campaign name, I can tell you sellers feel a lot more confident with their advertising. They always know what their goals are. They always know what they're actually trying to do with that specific campaign. And when I'm auditing certain campaigns, certain advertising accounts, and if I see that kind of campaign structure, I already know my job is not going to be very difficult here. I already know the seller kind of knows what he's doing, knows what he's trying to achieve with his campaigns and how he's going to achieve it with these campaigns. So, that's just the ideal way to do it. So please don't do something like this, doghouse test 1. That's what I see in 90% of the accounts I look at, right? So just be a bit more specific, enter these 10 things ideally, and your future self will thank you for it. Alright, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you thought that was helpful, I'd appreciate a like for the video. And of course, if you want to see more tips and you want to be warned about more mistakes, then hit the subscribe button and I'll see you around. And of course, if you have any questions at all, feel free to let me know in the comments. So yeah, that's it, and I'll see you in the next one.